Okay, so I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists. You received full bios in the digital packets that you received via email, but in the interest of time, we'll do shorter versions. So one thing to note is you'll find index cards on your tables. So during the session, we'll have some questions for reflection up on the screen. We can cue those up now, actually. And we invite you to reflect on those and write down any responses that come to mind on those index cards. And this is a way to facilitate learning in both directions. So as the panelists share their wisdom with us, this will be a way for them to hear what's coming up for you during the session. So towards the end, Ellen and Aaliyah will come around and collect the cards. And if you'd like to have more time, just give those cards to me or Ellen or Aaliyah before the end of the conference. So I've introduced Dr. Bird. And so our other panelists, we have Chief Vincent Mann, who you heard speak earlier, of the Ramapo Lenape Turtle Clan. We have Chief Richard Quiet Thunder Gilbert, past chief of the Nanticoke Lenape of Bridgeton, New Jersey. Born and raised in South Jersey's Pine Barrens, he married across the bay into a Millsboro, Nanticoke, and Cheswold Lenape family. For 30 years, he has educated the young and old in matters of protecting Mother Earth and the history, traditions, and spirituality of the Lenape. He enjoys teaching immensely and also considers this work a sacred obligation. Accompanying Chief Quiet Thunder is Greg Vizzi, a naturalist, author, nature photographer, and permaculturist residing in Sweetwater, New Jersey. Greg has helped to protect the Great Egg Harbor River, created environmental education materials for nonprofits and schools, and is in the process of publishing Chief Quiet Thunder's autobiography. Sitting next to me is Robert Lee McCaslin, Tribal Elder Uncle Lee of the Little River Band of Ottawa, who draws on 37 years of experience in the petroleum drilling industry to provide expert support to victims contaminated by the oil and gas industry. Born and raised in Michigan and Minnesota, he now resides in Bath, New York, and has been involved in anti-fracking activism in Pennsylvania. Ruth Ann Purchase is a linguist turned sociologist of Lenape Welsh descent with a passionate interest in Lenape language restoration. Founder of Leipzig River Watershed Association, Greenbridge Community Development Corporation, and Friends of Lenape Everywhere Indigenous Civics Education Movement, she lives and works in the Lenape Indian Tribe of Delaware Federal Census District as Cultural Mapping Project Manager. And finally, Mabari Bird is a Philadelphia-based campaign representative for Sierra Club's Outdoors for All campaign, and formerly Sierra Club's Delaware Watershed Community Coordinator for their Outdoors Activities Department. Mabari thrives in work that fosters collaborative partnerships, questions the status quo, and challenges organizations to reimagine what it looks like to equitably engage and support frontline communities. So this group brings a rich and diverse range of perspectives. We have represented people of different generations doing different kinds of work with Indigenous roots in different areas of the watershed as well as elsewhere on the continent, with other intersecting identities and with ties of kinship and friendship. We're so fortunate to hear from all of them today. So let's welcome all of our panelists. So I'll just preface this discussion by noting that we as an alliance are very early in our journey of connecting with Indigenous people. So the main purpose of this panel is to expose us to Indigenous worldviews and sow seeds of connection. So today's conversation may seem very expansive and broad and high level because the big picture questions are really the necessary starting point. So as we move forward and continue in this work, we can ask increasingly specific questions. So in the spirit of big questions, I'd like to begin by asking each panelist to describe their vision for the future of environmental advocacy and education, or to go even bigger if you like, for the future of how we live together on this earth.
Start off easy.
And I'd also invite you to speak to what obstacles need to be overcome in order for those visions to be realized. So, yeah, leaving this really open because we have people doing such different kinds of things with different backgrounds.
Benjamin Franklin, Yankee. It's always the beginning. And Gigi Nukmas Mishomas, our great-great-grandparents, said that one day we will wake up and we won't even recognize ourselves. And in that transformation of that, there's a true belief of understanding. Go next slide. And there we have the seven grandfathers' teachings. And he's quite an incredible guy. And if we all did our homework on him and we had his timeline, what does he have in common with us? But anyways, when we woke up, we live, learn, and forget. And then we remember through ceremony. And when we get through that part, it always comes from our heart. So we'll recognize that in day over day. And getting close to 2 minutes, not yet. Well, go ahead and this is like when the time began. And he's kind of like Benjamin Franklin, and everybody likes them guys in their pockets sometimes, and sometimes we don't, because sometimes that currency started about 1752, the paper currency. And I'm trying to show the places where it was claimed here. So we'll go to the next slide. And during this process of the lands in October 23rd of 1758, that was the land grab from England. They took that. So you can actually see the hand reaching out there, grabbing that part of it. And history plays a key part in the Aki, right? Aki meaning our Mother Earth. So the language is still a part of our big history because it's all written within the language. And from that time, we're not even a country yet, but they're going to receive the lands here. We'll turn to the next slide. Progressive, passive-aggressive violence is still violent. And that won't be published until, I think, it's got it up there, 196 years later. Right off the top of my head, I can't say it.
176.
About that? 176. About 176 later, right? So now the talk of treaties. And today we call them kind of like compacts with the state, and this tri-friendship that we have, because everything, treaty of peace and friendship, because that's what it was all over. And we've been there, we visit that. I thought I was pretty good on this journey until my nephew spoke up. He says, "Uncle, hey, where did you resolve in all this?" We had actually, through the treaties, identified my part in there until 1762. And from 1736 to 1836, we're not going to lose, we're going to share that exchange of over 500 million acres and 22 treaties, 7 payments. And when we do the research and the stories that are not told, but only in certain cabinets, they're stuck away in those books for later in use. And right now that's like the census. And 2022 is when the 1950 census will come out, and then everybody will start seeing they're about 72 years late. And that's passive aggressive. We should know where we are at all times. These land deeds here in New Jersey, by that, they were already land deeds here, the Aboriginal title or Indian title here. And in this book that wouldn't be published until 1904, we actually broke them all down and we got to learn some of our language. And then they found out that there's 825 of them. So the land deeds are really a key, right? And then, and in 1763, and why that's very important, is the 13 colonies that are here. And the other corporate offices across the water, the English and the French, they all made this decision, and we weren't incorporated with that. So they would come back, and that was all our reserve, all the way down to Florida. And I got a little keynote in Florida when they're trying to ban fracking right now. But more into absence sharpens love, and it's like the 7 grandfathers, presence strengthens it, and that's his favorite quote. And there we go. The Indigenous insight for environmental education. And in the great mystery, in that exchange of that tobacco. And that's how we give thanks to the Creator, Hitchimani Gunnisek and his garden. And we'll move one more forward. This is how the Great Lakes watershed looks. And this is a compact between states and state governments. When Mr. Bush was president, this is where this all came into alliance. Is our governor now violating that compact? It's a federal law. And in the state of Pennsylvania, they actually are. You know, they're just taking water. And remember, what comes up comes down. But more importantly, what goes in must come out. And that residual waste in the fracking part of hydraulic fracturing over there is the life of those wells are expected probably 3 years. They're going to lose their life expectancy at 87% within those 3 years of that life of that well. And sometimes you're in the right places at the right time because the Great Mystery put you there. And I testified at the Science Advisory Board in 2016. And at that time, there was no wells that was ever contaminated, any water whatsoever in the United States. And that's due to the due process of not telling the truth, being submissive. And then 2018, I got to be an expert witness where 52 wells was contaminated by drilling. And somehow they get to be isolated again and not have precedence throughout the state. Well, I met with Governor Wolf's cabinet and told them the dangers and the risks. And we're still at risk today, and it's even coming forward, and it's coming back to the east. And we'll go to the next slide. And here's an upcoming event. Rolling Stones magazine actually did a documentary where I got to drive him around and show him and point out some things. So he'll be coming to Philadelphia so shortly, this coming Saturday. So stay in touch, stay in tune, and keep it real. Oh, hey, there's Seneca Lake. Everybody heard of Seneca Lake, the movement up there, right? 650 people got arrested. It was an event that we did 2 water walks. Sharon Day come over, and actually was the She Get You Dot to help her with that event, those 2 times, and the LPG storage of the way. But after 650 arrests, and it was like fix-it tickets, couldn't believe it. Right? Went down there, we told the county police officer what we're going to do, we went out and did it. He come up, took us down there, got to fix the ticket, and I stood through all the hearings. And so I'm just a witness to that process, you know, spiritual support of that. And we did save that lake from any further damages. And I don't know if there's one more. That was it. That was the 2 minutes, if there was such a thing as time.
Thank you, Uncle Lee. Are there others who would like to share a vision in the future?
First of all, how many of you folks are involved in a watershed group, watershed organization other than the Alliance? Okay, so we have other watershed organizations. The Alliance, I'm incredibly impressed with you folks. You've only been around for 4 years, and you've got 23 centers. And the wisdom to acknowledge and include the Indigenous people within the watersheds. You asked for my vision. I was involved in a watershed organization, and that's a crazy word, watershed. I don't know how many people outside of us understand it or can relate to it, but it has a geographical, scientific, you might say, physical boundary. And in my vision, I see the need, I see the necessity, if we're going to create a peaceful and loving, sustainable world, we have to replace the artificial political jurisdictions and boundaries with something else, an earth-based boundary. And I see watersheds as an obvious jurisdiction, if you will. I think we have to replace the industrial, destructive industrial system that we're all embedded in with its bipolar political system, with an earth-based government and culture. I think what we need is a cultural renaissance based on the living environment. Native American cultures, indigenous cultures have the context, the sensibility, and the knowledge to lead us in that direction. They boil down into very simple, common sense phrases.
We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay. Water is life. This has come out of the Standing Rock struggle. Indigenous peoples everywhere are at the forefront of the struggle for environmental justice. and sustainability. And their fight is really our fight also. So we need to connect with those communities and people and create a better world. So how do you get rid of, or how do you stop the political blockade that we have, which is also a corporate blockade? You simply just create a better political system based on what you folks are doing, and just let them do the thing. Start grooming the leaders in your organizations that you identify in your high schools, elementary schools. Start educating them. Think long term. Start grooming them for positions in this political system. Senators, governors, mayors, and what do politicians do? They write legislation. Well, we can write legislation right here. And whoever is against that legislation, which would be cleaning up polluted sites, identifying industries that are destroying the water, you simply see who's supporting it and who's not. Who's not supporting it, you replace them. You can't do it overnight. You got to plan ahead long term. This is a new organization. You're going to be evolving and growing, I think, pretty rapidly. That's sort of a snapshot of what I had in mind. And I'm not very good at speaking in front of a large group like this, but I'd be glad to talk to a committee or a group. And I think what's needed is strategy and vision. And of course, definitely input from the indigenous folks. Because we're embedded in this industrial hyperreality, where we see everything out there as green, but we don't know what it is. We don't have that much contact with it. The indigenous peoples, traditional Indians, are connected to this living world. We feel like we're not connected. And we have been disconnected, but we have to reconnect and follow their wisdom in order to be connected. We're sort of connected on a scientific basis. Well, we know that water is life, and we know the chemistry of it, but it's also a living thing. It's a spiritual connection, and we need to have a spiritual connection with the natural world. I think all of you are here not because you want to hear us speak, because you have a passion and a commitment to make the world a better place. So I think that's all I have to say for now.
Kikeyuya nani kake. I say that as a beginning to remember all our ancestors and all our relations, including all living beings, and my direct ancestors and all their relations include every one of you. So that's the way I see myself, as connected, as the water connects us all. This is sacred. So one of my visions for the future is that we would recognize water as our sacred common ground and not be afraid to talk about it as sacred. If you as an organization don't feel comfortable using spiritual terms, let the local chiefs use the spiritual terms. Give them permission to say the word sacred and teach about what is sacred at your locations. I believe that the strategy we are adopting is hyper-localization. And as every one of us begins to live more and more locally, we are, for all intents and purposes, boycotting the international corporations and those that have enslaved us. We can only live locally by building trusting relationships with one another. And as a sign of that trust, I would like to encourage you to start giving away free water testing and water purification devices in your communities. Start with your local neighbors and the local people that you eat with and drink water with. Share as many as you can until the people you're with start to feel safe. And people who feel safe begin to work better together. Hyperlocalization requires that we learn to live together well. And this is something we can each do very privately and quietly. Doesn't cost a lot. We do have to adjust our finances a little bit, adjust our lifestyles a lot. But we can do this, and I'm very impressed with the young people's movement, the Sunrise movement, those who are occupying Earth Day to take it back from Walmart, etc., etc. I'm really honored by knowing so many people that are weaning themselves off toxins and choosing to live very, very locally. Those of us who want to keep a big perspective as good global citizens can adopt the Earth Charter. That's a strategy for living gently with all living things. The Earth Charter's been, I think it was dreamt of in the 80s and formalized in the 90s and signed on to by many nations at the United Nations. And there's a lot of curriculum available for free on the United Nations website about the Earth Charter. Combining the Earth Charter with the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People does it all. You really don't need any other strategy sessions. They're well thought through, they're polished, they're beautiful. Just adopt them and ask how you can implement them in your local communities and in your organizations. I recognize that we can be easily distracted and that we have been raised with the divide and conquer mentality. I realize that sometimes we fall for it and we attempt to mimic the power structure of our oppressors, as Paulo Freire said. But we don't have to. And when we drink water together that we have chosen to test and purify, we are making agreements for life. And these are sacred agreements. And I would like to honor the idea that we will restore some ceremony. So I'm going to stop talking so we can get down to the water and appreciate a ceremony that honors our interconnectedness with all life. I hope.
I am Dick Quiet Thunder. I'm 85 years old. I'm a Lenai Lenape. I'm a past chief of the Nanticoke Lenai Lenape tribe of New Jersey. And I teach in the school systems about the culture and our connection to the natural world. And anyone that will listen to me, I tell them about who I am, where I am, and why I am. The who I am is in Indian. The where I am is here on the turtle's back. The why I am is crucial. When the Creator placed Indian people upon the turtle's back, we were given a sacred obligation to protect this land. And as long as we were in control of the land, we stood by that connection, that obligation. We're no longer in control of the land. But we still have that obligation to protect this land. And I try to pass that obligation on to everyone that I meet. Maybe not as a sacred obligation, but as a common sense obligation. What happens to the natural world does not happen to quiet thunder or Indian people. It happens to everyone. We're all in this together, whether we like it or not. What happens to this land will affect all of us. Now, I'm finding, especially now, the audience are much more receptive than they have been in the past. And I ask, why is that? Many say it's because there's a fear in the land now. They see what is happening. And many are turning to the Lenape. Some think we have mystical powers. Maybe in the past some did have connections to the natural world that maybe isn't here today. But what we have is common sense. My friend Greg mentioned a few things. But we all can do something. If it's no more than to recycle, which makes dollars and cents, it makes common sense. But the first step is to change this mindset that we are superior to nature. We are not superior to something without it, you do not exist. So changing the mindset, where do I fit into this? From there, we're on the road. I'm seeing so many people involved in this water understanding. Sacred life. Everything on earth depends on water. And to see all you people here and you're connecting to that, that's very encouraging. My vision is to one day to be able to drink from virtually any stream of water without fear. Now, the world that I grew up in South Jersey as a small boy growing, I could drink from virtually any running water without fear. And growing up with that knowledge, I know that it is possible. And my vision is that sacred obligation that was given to my people when the Creator placed us here, you will not only accept this as a common sense obligation, but also as a sacred obligation of God. Thank you.
I hope what I share makes my ancestors proud, and whatever I do share that doesn't, it's coming directly from me, and my opinion, my experience, and anything else comes from my descendants and my mother and my grandmothers and those who have shared my ancestral practices with me and principles. I think about a conference that I attended about 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, it was PASA, Pennsylvania's Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, and Michael Twitty was there as a keynote. I don't know if you know who Michael Twitty is, but he is a food justice advocate. He holds on to and also cooks ancestral dishes, both African American and Native American indigenous background. And he talked about how we can come together as a community, and he said food. And it was just that simple. And in my experience, in my short experience compared to this panel, that when do we have some of the best conversations when we're in groups like this? When it's time to eat. We sit down at the table and we break bread with each other, and we have more intimate conversations about the challenges that we face individually and collectively. And so when I'm doing this work, and I've led youth groups, I've led young adults out to do environmental stewardship for the first time. Some of them have never put their hands in the soil, right? Think about that. Planting a tree for the first time. After we have that experience, after we planted, I've been lucky to plant thousands of trees through my time in this program. And after we sit down and break bread at our lunch, we reflect on our experiences. And we reflect and we talk about things that we wouldn't normally talk about during the day. So I say all that to say food sovereignty, right? When we talk about ways that we can come together, because the water, right, provides nourishment for our food to grow. And I think it's about making that practical in everyday life, and reminding folks, especially anyone in the room that wants to connect with communities that are on the front line of the impacts of climate change, that taking a shower, right, is sacred to a certain extent, right? You're utilizing the water. Washing your clothes, doing the daily activities of daily living. What the chief talked about, that mindset, and shifting the mindset back to valuing and understanding that these are privileges and that we have a responsibility to uphold to that. And so in terms of water, I think of food sovereignty, and I think of ways that we come around the fire and we break bread and we talk, and connecting the next generation to this work. Because I look in this room now, and I'll say this again in a lot of panels, I don't see any young people. I don't see any people coming up behind us in the space. And they are the ones that need to learn this information. And I think most people in this room are educated on watershed, issues involving the watershed, but those young folks are not. And if we're not willing to give up some of our power as teachers to let them be students and also be teachers as well, then I think we'll always have that generational disconnect in terms of constantly trying to convey a message to young people about how important this is when they don't feel involved or connected in the movement. So, thank you.
I just wanted to say, because I'm thinking about, we're preaching, you're the choir, preaching to the choir, but I've been a teacher for 35 years, so I'm kind of living my trail. But my thought and my thinking is that environment includes the environment of humans to humans, as well as humans to the earth. So my activism has been using the classroom to reach what Mabari is saying, our young people. So I interact, as you well know, as a teacher, and you multiply 35 years times how many young people, come through my space. And so I have used personal power, positive energy. My voice is like a song. You heard me sing, but my voice in my everyday speaking is very song-like. So I have infused, which is what I'm saying to you, to cycle the infusion of this power that I'm feeling in this room coming from you. You are some very powerfully committed people already to this work. You are warriors. You are fighters. You have have a tremendous amount of power. I'm kind of getting tingly feelings from you. So everywhere you go, projecting that power of justice and inclusion and sacredness of the land as the chiefs, you don't have to say it, you're acting it, you're being it. And there are those of us who stand, in front of the bulldozers and, hug the trees, and those are our frontline warriors. And then there are those of us who close the door as I do, and I may have, when I was doing elementary school for 10 years, I had 30 very young people in front of me, and then I would use personal power to bring them into the space that we are living. And now I've been teaching university level for 25 years, and I'm aware that I'm teaching the future managers, decision makers, politicians, the people who will make the decisions, as the chiefs have said, moving forward, and Mabari is saying about the youth. So wherever you are, in whatever you're doing, you are using this personal power to bring people into the space in which we do live. You live there, I live there, we live there together. It's such an honor to be here with this group of warriors, you, and us using this personal power we have, and then political power, agency power. You are absolutely, it's an honor, I just can't tell you. So finally, I speak all over the world. I'm at the end of my journey of speaking, but if you'd like to have a singer come, there's not that many of us here in the Delaware Valley who sing the songs anymore. But my son is now my traveling buddy. As you know, we're singing together, and we will do that. If that type of energy is something that you would like to have to open some of your sessions, as the chief said, bringing in Indigenous voices, we're here and we're offering that, to you. So much love to the new generation of warriors, continuing generation. Some of you have been in this for years, and some of you are just coming into the space, but it's an honor. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question?
For real? Yeah, so the question is about vision. Your vision for the future of environmental advocacy and education, and more broadly, if you wish, how we live together on this earth.
I have a big paintbrush. Hi, everybody. In the back there. Making sure you guys don't open up those food pods yet. Yeah, my vision for the future is that, Native people, Indigenous people, need to be encouraged, need to be held up, lifted up for the knowledge that they have. We walk with a tremendous amount of knowledge that we are still unlocking, because, through diaspora and, displacement and slavery and all those things, a lot of those parts that connect us to everything have been kind of lost. But when we go through our ceremonies, right, we have visions, and those visions are real, they're not dreams. When I go to sleep, I know if I have a dream, but when I go to sleep, I plan on having a vision. It's my thoughts about all my experiences that I've had that day, and all the people that I've met. And so like tonight, I'm not going to get any sleep because all of you are going to be in my head, right? It's true. It's very true. So as far as looking to the future, we as Indigenous people have been kept out of the mainstream society, I can't say that has been, I don't know why that's happened, but there's a tendency, even till last night, there was a debate on it. I didn't even know what a debate was, right? And so I'm watching the debate and I'm seeing, Mr. Bloomberg, a billionaire on one end, and another billionaire on the other end, and then all these people in the middle. And, basically what they were talking about was like, I did this, and I did that. And then you had the people in the middle, like, the woman, I want to say her name, yeah, that one. When I sat there and was watching, it was as if she was sitting here on this panel with us, right? Or sitting in the audience. She was acting like a human being, somebody that was in touch with what's around her. Do we need to be concerned about what's happening in China right now? Yes, right? Now, when I wake up in the morning, the very first thing I do is to not be thinking about what's happening in China, even though I know now there's over 80,000 cases of coronavirus. And it's coming, right? It's like when our ancestors were up on the high ridges in the Palisades looking down, what became known as the Hudson River, the Mohican-Tuck, towards that sacred place, Manhattan, which we named for where the hickory trees grew, which we went there to get our material to making our bows. And what we saw was the British ships coming. Right? And you can put yourself in a place of not really knowing what was coming up that river, but the thought that it was so out of place that it was scary, right? There was much cause for alarm. And to take this coronavirus and to look at it as those ships, right? And it's coming here. And it's going to touch every single person that's in this room, one way or the other. And that is it's not a good way to show how we're all connected in this world. But it definitely does, right? And so for your question, I already forgot it again, I'm sorry. The vision for the future for me is that Native people need to be welcomed, understood, believed in, trusted in, and they haven't been. Watching that debate last night, there was only one mention of Native people. It was about African Americans and about whoever it is at the top, but there was no mention of the Native American people who were just beginning their civil rights movement, right? That's really shocking. I mean, this is 2020, right? This is the United States, the most powerful place in the world, and yet, it goes around and defends all of these unfortunate people around the world. At least that's what you're led to believe, but the reality of it is that they're protecting the interests of corporations and themselves. If you're sitting in this room because you want to make a difference in the world, you have to first realize that the most important world is the one that you live in, right? That little spot, that little 2-foot, space, And when you can take control over that and make that a good place, then you can go to your neighbor or your coworker, right? And then between the two of you, one's going to have problems, one's going to win the lottery, between the two, you make it so that your world is a better place, right? And then when you think about that a little bit bigger, and then you grow up and you end up working for the federal government, right? And then your world's a little bit bigger, right? And then your concern of what you're thinking about is in a larger purview. But when you go home, right, and you're sitting at home and you come home and your wife's there and your children, most parents when they come home, they have a bad day and work in a corporate office and they do that. I won't throw this, but I throw it. When they walk through the door, they have a bad day, and what they do is they take their keys and they throw them on the table and they go to the refrigerator and they crack open a beer and they start drinking it. What they didn't realize was that when they came through the door, the kid was sitting on the couch, had that day been bullied, right? Or maybe saw somebody kill a bird, or a turtle. problem with the world that we live in, when you take it to that level, is that it's moving so fast, right, that you forget to slow down. That you forget to take yourself back out of that place that you have to go into. You don't have to physically be in that space 24 hours a day going 100 miles an hour because you miss everything. And the reason why I asked you the question, of what the question was, because I was busy listening or paying attention outside and watching the birds, most of them migrating up the river. But what I did notice was that there was 3 seagulls, and those seagulls were flying around, and then those seagulls landed in the water, and then they went like this, right? They migrated down the river without actually flapping their wings. That was a beautiful thing for me to see. That's about slowing down, taking in what is here, the beautifulness of what is out there we are a part of. Why would we not want to protect it? You know, I know that if I'm up the river and I do something to that water that's going to poison it, and then it comes down here and that's going to affect my relatives, right? So when we talk about the future, we have to be more inclusive of Native people. We have to look at the Native people's traditional ways and values and customs and try to implement them back into the society and those worlds that we have. So each one in your individual places, you should be trying to do that. You should be, reaching out to Native communities, trying to encourage, their youth or even their elders to be a part of what's going on. There's a lot to gain, right? This game that we play called life is not just about this. We're not supposed to have, taking pills every day just so that we're happy. We need to be able to enjoy each other's company and love one another, and care about the environment that we're in. So looking to the future, I can see a bright future. That fire has been lit. We're living in it right now. And from us to all of you who's listening, we're in that time that the Creator has said, we all need to learn to come back together to be one people in order to heal this place. And what that really meant was that we're going to heal each other, right? Because my Mother Earth, she can heal herself. She does, right? When she's cold, she shakes. That's the earthquakes, fires, winds, storms. What we're fighting here for is actually humanity, In order to be able to do that, we need humans, people who know what humility is, and maintain that as your threshold. Don't allow someone to take away your humility or who you are as a human being, because if they do, then you've been lost. So, sorry.
Thank you.
You said that in one.
So I had a whole other question about collaboration, but I think maybe that will be answered in conversations that happen through the rest of today and into tomorrow morning. Many of our panelists are staying for another night, or at least for another meal. So I want to just make sure there's an opportunity for a question from the audience before we move into closing. So if you have a question, please come to the mic at the center of the room and introduce yourself with your name and where you are coming from in the watershed.
Hi, my name is Vinnie Mann. I'm a resident of New Jersey. And I have a question for you, Chloe. And that is, in the work that you do and everyone else in this room, what is it, how do you see the future in regards to advocacy, which I love that you use the word advocacy, because I'm not an activist, neither are you. Right? Yes, I said use. That's Y-O-U-S. So my question really is, Chloe, to you all, what is your vision for the future to include and help to raise the voices of Indigenous and Native people?
Yes, I was first.
Well, that's a hard question, so thanks for putting it back on me.
You guys owe me $1.
I mean, I think having you all gather today is really like a first step that represents listening, reaching out, making an initial connection with all of the painful and unjust history that precedes us. I think that's the only place to start. So listening to you all and to others from the communities that you represent today, I think, yeah, to just prioritize working together in a way where we're listening to Indigenous people to guide the efforts and priorities. We have lots of different ways of working on the physical issues of our world and our environment, but yeah, just I think shifting toward the wisdom that you all have shared and being open to changing our plans and giving up a little bit of our power and our self-interest in favor of responding to the traditional peoples of this land. Yeah, I don't know how exactly to go about all of that, but I think that's the fundamental thing that needs to happen.
Don't forget that you're Indigenous too.
Yes. Yeah, all of us are Indigenous to somewhere, so I think it's also really important to do that introspection and be in touch with where we all come from, which is a journey for me and I think for all of us.
Thank you.
Is there time for a quick question that might not be very quick?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Ian. I'm with the Lehigh Gap Nature Center over here, but I go to school at Muhlenberg College, which is in Allentown, so we've been living there for the past 4 years. I'm in a class right now called Religion and Ecology, and actually we're currently talking about, well, we've been talking the whole semester about this idea of what is sacred and sacred space, and we're on the topic of sacred space as it relates to Indigenous Americans, and we're looking right now at Vine Deloria Jr. and how Vine has sort of contextualized sacredness in this Western theological sense through Judeo-Christian roots. How might we, I've heard the word sacred dropped a few times through the panel discussion. I was wondering if there's any specific ways that we can work on changing our idea of what is sacred in the context of contemporary American culture, and maybe like elaborate on your own definition of what is sacred. Something that's been kind of burning my mind recently, so thank you.
To begin with, spend more time in the natural world. Some years back, I was doing a program at Holly Heights High School, so in the Pine Barrens, and the principal used the word nature deficit. I never heard that before. And after the program, I asked her about it, and she said it's so many students are so disconnected with the natural world that it has an effect on them. Well, when I went back the following year, she had convinced the school board to build a pond on the high school land. And each time I would go back, she would give me reports on that original pond. And it started with the pond, and they introduced tadpoles and fish, and gradually they started a system. The plants started to come back, insects started to come back. The frogs, the hop toads, and then the snakes. And gradually, they started to observe a red-tailed hawk. And the last time I was there, they have a full-fledged ecosystem now. And part of the curriculum is the students have to go and spend time there and observe. And that's a great way to start, because I've been in 5th grade classes and hauled up a red fox pelt and a raccoon pelt, and they didn't know what the difference was. That's how far we moved. People have become with the natural world. If you're not conscious of the natural world and how important it is, then you're losing out on something that's so vital. Without the natural world, we do not exist. And we've let ourselves slip into thinking that we're superior to nature. You can't be superior to something that without it you don't exist. And I think by spending more time in the natural world, it'll help you to understand just how important it is. It goes back to that sacred obligation and the common sense obligation. Recognize and acknowledge that that's what sustains us mentally, physically, and spiritually. I came in the world June the 13th, 1934, at sunrise. And that first winter, I almost died from pneumonia. For the next 9 winters, each winter, pneumonia would come back. And we lived in an area where at that time, doctors were reluctant to administer to Indian people. Only by the grace of the Creator. In fact, that my grandmother still remembered the old medicines. That's what pulled me through. I can remember fevers where everything was like a fog. I could always see my grandmother's hand reaching through the fog, pulling me back from death. She would not let me die. But one of the lessons I learned from my grandmother, it's possible, always be awake when that sun rises. It's power. That begins your spiritualism each morning, because you know that man can't duplicate that sun. So it makes you kind of humble. And I think that's what needs to be done. We need to humble ourselves. We're fortunate. We're alive. We're living here on the turtle's back. Think of your children and grandchildren, what that turtle's back's going to be like. So the 7th generation, it's not new. It's been with Indian people for a very long time. And it means simply this: all the gifts that we enjoy in nature today, we have a sacred obligation to make sure that 7 generations in the future have those same gifts. Not live for oneself or live for today, but live for 7 generations. That shocks a lot of people when they hear that, because they look at themselves. Where do I fit into that? How do I fit into that philosophy? So I turn back to the very things that sustained my life through those 9 winters with pneumonia. My grandmother still remembered the old medicines, and she would take me with her to gather these medicines. So I know firsthand that I'm here today because of that gift that the Creator put here, those medicines. Oh God.
just want to say, let's leave that question open as we invite panelists to give any final words of inspiration or encouragement. And we'll end back with Chief Man and Uncle Lee to lead our closing ceremony, because we're already at the time we're supposed to be ending.
I'd like to hold up this word shock. People are shocked by what Chief Quiet Thunder says sometimes. And I think a lot of us are either in culture shock or about to be in culture shock. And there's already proven methods for preparing ourselves for culture shock. When we take children into nature, when we go ourselves, sometimes we're culture shock. When we ask ourselves to get up at sunrise, sometimes that's culture shock. So I guess my word of encouragement for you is to recognize that transition is sacred. This time of transition is precious. Journal, share your stories. We are transforming into a more beautiful world that we know is possible. It's an honor to be with you on this path.
I second that also. It's an honor to be up here with everyone and this audience. My definition of sacred is very cut and dry, very simple. It's everything that supports life. It's the living world. It's water. It seems like a no-brainer to me. My words of encouragement is that what I've learned through studying Native American cultures is that there is a spiritual counterpart to flesh reality, physical reality. What you do in the physical reality and all your thoughts and actions reflects up into the spirit world and reverberates and comes down and has an effect. Same thing, what you do in the spirit world through your prayers and actions will come back and affect the physical reality. So just the simple act of picking up a piece of trash has a tremendous reverberation that comes back, goes into Mother Earth, and has an effect. What you folks are doing, you have no way of measuring it, how powerful it is and it's going to be into the future. So I'm very optimistic about that. Back in 1973, after I finished my service time in the military, I started to become aware of what was happening to the earth. And there were no organizations like this back then that I knew of. And over the years, I realized what a privilege it was to be able to do something, just to have a voice, just to connect with people that shared the same mission. So don't ever think that what you're doing is just a little bit. It means a lot, and collectively it's tremendous.
That encouragement word is to share and share the language, just like the word ceremony. Manadu, we walk away. And just in that presence of that word, the Spirit is here to help us as we take that journey. It's just like the Sema that we're all ready to offer to the Nevi, that river. And it's been listening to our hearts, to our invisible thoughts. It's been collectively thinking back there, waiting. And when we acknowledge that Sema, where's she at? But do you see Denise? You all right? And those songs that are offered up go right to that same because that's that exchange. And it's like that elder here that's saying, when we recognize the sacredness of that sema, and my niece that is holding that God in this space, in this time. And until we walk over, we're about ready for that sema, that tobacco offering, that exchange with the water and the gifts that she's holding. And we're thinking about that, and so it's always that exchange of love, and that sacrifice for reaching out and offering that to that elder that has been waiting for that tobacco to return in that sacred manner. He knows what to do with it. He'll actually, go to the place where he needs to deliver that and come back with that answer that you are encouraged to ask through the Spirit. So that's Manitoulin Walkaway ceremony. And that's where I thought we were at when we were heading out to sing this song and offer that tobacco up. And that niece was passing that around, I think it disappeared.
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Oh,
I'm gonna sing a song that will take maybe 1 or 2 minutes of my contribution.
Did the development of that pond at that school makes me think about how Chief Mann described, we're always in a rush. And I think about all the trees that I've had the opportunity to plant. And when I was learning about trees and more in depth about ball and burlap and trees coming already prepared for the plant, I thought about, wow, that's not the way I learned. That's not the way my grandmother taught me. And thinking about a seed, and it starts as a seed in the soil. And I think about that in terms of relationships. A lot of times we come with the trees already planted, right? We already come with this idea that we want to quickly rush things and have things happen. But like the chief said, slow down, right? We're building an ecology of relationships. And so what that looks like is slowing that process down, building trust with the communities that we want to engage. And a lot of times that's just having conversation, breaking bread, talking with one another, and lifting each other's up and telling stories. So for me in this work, it's tough, especially when you're dealing with communities of trauma and have a lot of trauma associated with the water. There's communities that are fearful of the water, they don't want to get in the water, and that's a problem because we know we come from water. We come from that life source. So to me, that's an indicator that we have a real big problem in terms of creating that connection or reconnection to the natural world when we have communities of indigenous and oppressed backgrounds that are afraid of the natural land. Do you hear that? They are afraid of the natural land. So I think we really need to acknowledge that in this space when we talk about building connections and building community, that the natural world tells us and shows us all the time that when we plant our flowers, we plant them and we water them and we watch them grow, and it takes time for that plant to build a relationship with that soil, to build a relationship with your garden, for you to build a relationship with your own garden. Why can't we use that in the same way we build relationships with each other? And I feel like we're rushing, as the chiefs have reminded me today, that we're rushing the process all the time because we're in crisis mode, because we see what's going on around us, but we don't control that. We don't control the natural world. We can only control ourselves. So that's my encouragement, is to make sure that relationships today, whatever they're started now, that they're built at the speed of trust and not the speed of accomplishments and deadlines and goals and deliverables. We know we have to meet them, but we need to meet each other where we are too as well.
My words of encouragement is really short. How many people in the room have children? Keep your hand up. How many of the people in the room have parents? My word of encouragement is, keep your hands up because it's uncomfortable. My word of encouragement is that when you go home tonight, right, if you have children, that you give them a big hug. You tell them that you love them. If you have parents, you know, when you get home, or you get out of here, you pick up the phone and make a phone call to them and let them know that you're thinking about them today. That's my words of encouragement, because that is really what we're talking about, right? About healing ourselves, healing our world. And when we put trust and faith into that, raise your arm up. No, I'm just kidding. You can put your arm up. But when we put that back into our lives, we really begin to understand what sacredness is, right? We are going to go outside and we're going to have a ceremony. Michaeline right now is passing the tobacco. You take a little pinch and we have a bowl, and you're going to offer up your prayers with that tobacco, that sandalwood in that bowl. And then whoever, hopefully everybody will want to, come outside and we'll go down to this corner and we're going to try to encourage our auntie to take a few steps, even with her big boot, so that she can sing, or she just has to sing at the top of her lungs as we say our prayers and offer that tobacco up into the river, right? That's going to take our prayers all the way to the ocean. And then through what you guys know is science, right? And those prayers are going to be lifted up with that water and go up to the Creator, right? And then our blessings will come back down. They'll come back down as rain. They'll come back down as snow, condensation. So that's my words of encouragement to you all, you know. Acknowledge your kids when you go home. Thank your parents for being there, for you to choose them to be your parents. Give them that respect and that, show them that humility that they gave you. They sacrificed a lot. Thank you.